Hey, welcome. Today, we're going to look at European colonialism in a pretty different way. Not just as some chapter in a history book, but as something that was built, piece by piece. A global system with a blueprint so effective that its architecture, its very structure, is still all around us.
So that brings up a huge question, right? How does an empire from hundreds of years ago still manage to shape our world today? How can decisions made in, say, the 16th century still echo in our economies, our borders, and even who we are? Let's trace the lines of this incredible and incredibly enduring architecture. So, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the colonial blueprint, the why behind it all. Then we'll dig into the human foundation it was built on. After that, we'll look at the political framework that held it together and the cultural imprint it left behind. And finally, we'll see what's left of that enduring structure today.
First up, the blueprint. Because with any structure, you've got to ask, why was it built in the first place? What was the real motive behind this massive global machine? Well, when you dig into the source material, the answer is actually powerfully simple. The goal was economic exploitation. The empires built by powers like Britain, France, and Spain weren't some historical accident. No, they were designed from the ground up to be massive engines for extracting wealth. And just think about the sheer scale of it. We're not just talking about gold and silver here. We're talking about sugar, tobacco, cotton, spices. This wasn't just trade. It was a systematic transfer of resources and wealth that literally fueled Europe's industrial revolution and completely rewired the global economy. But an engine like that needs fuel. And that brings us to the most profound, the most devastating cost of this whole construction. The human foundation it was all built on. This number, it's just staggering. It's almost impossible to really wrap your head around it. Millions. That's the scale we're talking about when we discuss the human lives that were captured, stolen, and forced into servitude to build this colonial architecture. And this system had a name, the transatlantic slave trade. It was the brutal, horrifyingly efficient mechanism that made all that economic exploitation possible. A system of forced human labor that caused unimaginable suffering and, in the process, permanently changed the demographics of two entire continents. Okay, so you've got the economic motive and the human labor. But how did they maintain control over these vast territories, often thousands of miles away? Well, for that, you need a political framework. You need scaffolding to keep it all standing. And the process was pretty methodical. First, you establish physical control. Simple enough. Second, you either dismantle or take over the local leadership and impose your own system of government. And third, and this is crucial, you draw new borders on a map. This quote really gets to the heart of it. These lines on a map, they weren't drawn to reflect the people who actually live there. Not at all. They were drawn for the convenience of colonial administrators, completely ignoring the ethnic, tribal, and cultural realities that had existed for centuries. And this wasn't just about messy map-making. It was a strategy. By forcing rival groups together into one territory, or splitting cohesive communities apart, colonial powers basically planted the seeds for future conflict. It's a direct cause of so much of the instability and the power struggles we still see in many parts of the world. Now, beyond the political scaffolding, colonialism went even deeper. It reached inside these societies and started, well, changing the interior design, if you will. What's really interesting here is that this wasn't just a simple one-way street. Of course, Europeans brought their own languages, their religions, their laws. But culture, it's porous. So what happened was this incredibly complex exchange, which created new hybrid identities, blending traditions in food, music, and spirituality that are still so vibrant today. All right, let's bring all these pieces together. The blueprint, the foundation, the framework. Let's see what the main structure is that's managed to outlast the empires themselves. So after you look at all the pieces, the motive, the human cost, the political control, what's the one thing that really lasts? The source material we're looking at argues it all points to a single powerful concept. Inequality, a deep, foundational imbalance in economic and social power that wasn't a bug in the system, it was a feature. It was designed right into the colonial architecture from day one. And this inequality was absolutely not an accident. It was the direct result of a system built on exploiting resources and labor, a system that was enforced by discriminatory policies, all designed to concentrate wealth and power into the hands of the colonizers. So here's the key takeaway. The vast economic gaps we see between different parts of the world today, they aren't new. They're the direct echoes of this colonial structure. You could say the fault lines were drawn centuries ago, and the ground is still shaking from it. And that leaves us with one final thought. If we accept that this architecture was built over centuries, and that we are, in many ways, still living within its walls, what does that actually mean for us today? How do we navigate the rooms of a house we didn't build?